We are getting ready for training camp, and we're honing in on specific divisions here on HQ Spotlight. Today, we are focusing on the NFC East and what questions we have for the defending champs, the Eagles. What about Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels? Can they run it back to another NFC championship? And the Cowboys, always very high expectations for America's team. They got a new head coach in place, and Brian Schottenheimer replacing Mike McCarthy. And then we have, of course, the long shot to win the division in the Giants, who want to win right now. They have a very crowded QB room. Of course, the Eagles, they're the favorites to win that division at -135. So let's welcome in our NFL analysts Ryan Wilson and Kyle Long to answer our burning questions about the NFC East. And we are starting with the Eagles because, Ryan, we're asking a question here that we have asked a few times before as it pertains to the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, who is going to be working under a new signal caller here, a new OC once again, something we've been talking about in the past, 2 seasons as it pertains to Jalen Hurts.
Mahalo, Jacqueline. Hello, Kyle. Good to see you guys. So the issue was back in 2022, the Eagles had lost Shane Steichen to Indianapolis. They replaced him with Brian Johnson, who wasn't long on experience. And while they still went to the playoffs, they looked nothing like the Eagles team prior to that season and what we saw last season, just because the offense was so disjointed and discombobulated. Kellen Moore came in last year, got things back on track. Now he has a head coaching job. But unlike the Brian Johnson promotion, Nick Sirianni, the head coach, has promoted Kevin Patullo, who has been with him since he arrived in Philadelphia. They're on the same page. He was named assistant head coach last season, so he is in lockstep with what it sounds like Nick Sirianni wants this offense to look like and what this offense should look like, and that's basically a continuation of what Kellen Moore was able to do last year on one of the most dominating teams we've seen in a while, perhaps outside of the Chiefs doing it repeatedly. So I think this is going to be something to keep an eye on, but it feels a little different than the last time when Shane Steichen left, because the continuity is going to be there. They have all those playmakers. They have Jalen Hurts played at a high level. They have some guy named Saquon Barkley. Perhaps one of the only concerns is an offensive line that isn't as veteran as it once was.
You know what? This offensive line is really the least of my concerns here, Ryan. And it's good to see you guys. I would say this, regardless of who's calling plays at the end of the day, that core that you were finishing up with there, they leave no doubt, in my opinion, about the offensive side of the ball for the Philadelphia Eagles. The big question for me is, are they able to maintain that level of dominance we saw in the Super Bowl? That front seven on the defensive side of the ball dominated Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, some pieces going to be out of the equation this year. Milton Williams gone in free agency, but the core of that defense remains in Vic Fangio's group on the back end. They do a great job allowing those dogs to hunt up front, and no pun intended, a lot of Georgia Bulldogs there for the Philadelphia Eagles. The youth movement has to continue stepping up, and guys like Jalen Carter have to be that dominant force, play in, play out. It can't just be a flash in the pan. Need that type of leadership up front.
Yeah, it's like Athens North there in Philadelphia. Let's get to the Cowboys because they finished the season 7-10, missed the playoffs. Dak is coming off of an injury. They have a new head coach, so there are a lot of questions here for Dallas, but which one sticks out to you the most, Kyle?
For me, it's that offensive line, and I've been keeping an eye, obviously, on that offensive line for a very long time because they've had some great players. Well, all those greats that I came to know and love are now out of the building. Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, that was yesterday. This year, we're looking at a group of guys that have 3 big-time draft picks there. Obviously, Tyler Booker for recent memory, and then Cooper Beebe last year and Tyler Guyton. 3 of those guys extremely young. Tyler Smith, Terrence Steele, the other 2 guys going to be there. If those 5 offensive linemen can find a way to work together and continue to rise to the occasion, you're looking at an offense with George Pickens, Dak Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb that can be one of the most dangerous in football. So I think the weight is on the shoulders of that offensive line group in Dallas.
Yeah, and the good thing about what Kyle is mentioning here, if that offense clicks, that can help out the defense, especially the secondary, which has been banged up with injuries. Trevon Diggs has had 2 knee injuries to the same knee. He's rehabbing that once again. Deron Bland has been the bright spot in terms of him being healthy and being a playmaker, but after that, there are a ton of questions. You see Trevon there. They drafted Suvone Revel in the 3rd round out of ECU, another long physical cornerback who tore his ACL last September for the Pirates, so he hasn't played since then. And is he going to be ready for the start of the season? Physically, he might be, but even so, it takes cornerbacks a little bit of a transition going from college to the NFL to figure out how to play at that level with that speed. There are other questions in the secondary they have to concern themselves with. They've had injuries along the linebacker position. DeMarvin Overshown, for example, was electric when he's healthy, but he struggled to stay on the field. So the defense is going to be a question mark. I know we like to focus on the offense and Dak and Brian Schottenheimer. Matt Eberflus is new defensive coordinator coming over from Chicago after his tenure as a head coach didn't work out in Chicago with the Bears. So that could be a bright spot in terms of him as a defensive coordinator. The concerns, of course, are the health and the pressure now puts on Dak Prescott and that offense to put up points.
And the schedule makers knew we wanted some drama early on, so we're going to get it with the Cowboys and the Eagles. The Cowboys heading to Philly on September 4th. We get to see that to kick off the regular season. All right, let's go to the Commanders because Dan Quinn, a phenomenal season there with the Commanders. Jaden Daniels had a phenomenal rookie year. So, Ryan, how many of your questions for the Commanders are circling around Jaden Daniels and what he can do in year 2 there?
All of them. If I had 100 questions, it'd probably be 99. Just the sophomore slump question is one that we sort of lean on as a crutch, and maybe it's a lazy question. So I went and looked. The last 20 years, quarterbacks who started as rookies 8 games or more going into year 2, what did they look like? And it's a list that's pretty long, but it's also pretty impressive because there are 42 quarterbacks in the last 20 years. 30% of them, almost 31%, have won more games they lost as a rookie and doubled down and did it again in year 2. And there are names that span the gamut, whether it's Kenny Pickett, doesn't necessarily blow your hair back, Tua Tagovailoa, Lamar Jackson, Andrew Luck. Those are just some of the names. And I think if we're going to rank Jaden Daniels in that group of names I just mentioned, he's going to be near the top in terms of what he was asked to do last year with Cliff Kingsbury in that offense. Scary Terry, that contract situation is a precarious one. They had to sort that out, but they have playmakers there. I think the offensive line will be better. And while it's a question going into training camp, I think Jaden Daniels is going to answer all those questions pretty early on, and Commanders fans should feel pretty good about how 2025 gets off.
Yeah, Ryan, I got a lot of questions about Cliff Kingsbury as well. Is he going to be a guy that continues to be in Washington for Jaden's foreseeable future, or is he going to be jumping at the best opportunity at a head coaching position at the end of this year? Look, people had their doubts about him as a coordinator, but look at the guys that he's coached and look at the way that he's been able to get the most out of his players. You know, people often look at the win-loss column, and that's a smart thing to do, but I look at the production and what his expertise is, and he works well with quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels was fantastic last year. I'm not taking anything away from his performance, but Cliff Kingsbury had a lot to do with that. What does this next iteration of offense look like with Jaden Daniels? Is it more of the same? Because a lot of these defensive coordinators, they're like batters in baseball. They just need one at bat to see the fastball, and then they're on it. So what kind of changes are we going to see? And is he going to set himself up to be the next guy who's hot in the head coaching carousel?
Yeah, to your point, Kyle, if you Google Cliff Kingsbury right now, there are all these articles that are talking about him being the top head coaching target for 2026, and the season hasn't even kicked off just yet. Finally, let's go to the Giants. The long shot to win the division, a squad that has 9 wins in the last 2 seasons, and we heard from the brass, hey, we want to win right now. There's already pressure on that coaching staff. So, Kyle, what questions do you have when it comes to the Giants?
Well, one way to eliminate a lot of questions is just to get a bunch of dudes and pin their ears back and have them rush the passer like a man on a mission, a bunch of men on a mission. And that's what the New York Giants have. They've got the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse there, and it starts inside with Dexter Lawrence. Mike Renner this morning, who I trust his opinion very highly, he said that's the best pass rushing nose he's seen in his memory of football, which is something to say. Dexter Lawrence dominant, and that's where you get a lot of these rushers on the edge free up. And when you talk about the Giants, you're looking at Burns, Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter. And I named Abdul Carter last, but he may be the best of the bunch. Look, if they got questions on offense, the best way to shore things up and give yourself some insurance is rush that passer and stop the run. This Giants group, they may end up being the best third down pass rush unit in the entire NFL when this thing's said and done this season.
Kyle, you're reading Russ Wilson's mind because he wants this defense to be lights out, because the question around him and Brian Daboll is, can this offense in New York come anywhere close to looking like the offense looked in Buffalo when Brian Daboll got this job, in part because of what he was able to accomplish with Josh Allen? So far, not really. We saw flashes from Daniel Jones, but mostly uninspiring play and injuries that led to him now being elsewhere. He's in Indianapolis after playing for the Vikings for a minute last season. But Russ Wilson, can he have success in an offense that's West Coast based, quick game? That's not really Russ's game, but he has playmakers around him. Obviously, it starts with Malik Neighbors, and if you get the ball in his hands, that solves a lot of problems. But I want to see what this looks like going forward, because they have also drafted Jackson Dart. How long until we see him? And of course, they have Jameis Winston waiting in the wings as well, should Russ go down with injury or there's a QB competition. So a lot of pressure, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, on this coaching staff and front office. They're running out of patience, John Marr has said, while deciding to retain both those GMs and head coaches. So we'll see how this plays out. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Russ to look more like the Russ we saw in Seattle than the one we saw in Denver.
Yeah, the Giants have had 8 different starting quarterbacks in the last 5 seasons, none with a winning record. So, Mr. Unlimited, it is your time to shine. Ryan, Kyle, we certainly appreciate it as we are honing in on the NFC East and getting a look at the odds to win it all. The Super Bowl champs, the Eagles, they're the favorites at -135. Then comes the Commanders, 6-1 odds for the Cowboys, and the Giants sitting at 25-1 to win the NFC East.
Up next, we're going to take a look at some of the